Hello, welcome to another study of the Psalms. My name is Carl Santos. I'm the pastor at New City Church in Calgary, and today we are on our 17th Psalm. I just did a quick count. It looks like this is our 17th study, so well done. I know a bunch of you have been following along and doing them all. Touche. If not, welcome. If this is your first one or you're getting into the series, it's just an opportunity for me to help do what I can to shed some light on some Psalms and give a different perspective to them and help you walk through them verse by verse, and just so you can see how I tend to approach things. And it's just great to be on this journey with you. So today we're looking at Psalm 46, which is again another well-loved Psalm, one that is really the battle cry and was the battle cry. I was seeing it everywhere in social media in the early parts of the COVID crisis, this "Be still and know that I am God." And we're going to take a fresh look at that today. So, let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the fact that we can be still in all things, and help us to see what that means in far more robust way than we're used to as we look at the Psalm this morning. Father, thank you for all these things. Be with us, God. Thank you for your protection, your strength, your majesty over us, your people. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so let me read the Psalm and then we're going to get into it. And I know this is a well-loved Psalm, and I think just having read it this morning before I jumped on here, I think we're going to see some pretty fun things. So let me read it to you. Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Okay, so here, what do we know about this psalm from the outset? First, as I said in I think the very first study we did when I did the intro to Psalms in general, the context of these Psalms are sometimes assumed by us. We look at the Psalms and we try to figure out what was going on in the life of David when he wrote them, Solomon, or here the sons of Korah. What was going on? What are they talking about historically? Because we think that if we get the contextual side of the Psalm, it'll help us interpret it better. And that's true. Oftentimes it does help us interpret it. But it seems that intentionally the Psalms have been left quite vague. And a lot of information has been left out of them so that they can be a help to the church, to God's people throughout all generations. And this psalm is quite vague. Here's what we do know. It seems to have been written at a time of great national crisis. There's obviously been a huge crisis that is going on here. At least that's what it looks like. And in the face of this crisis, the psalmist and those singing and then the city declare this indomitable faith. And in the face of trial. And that, I think, is the context. Something is going on that is rocking the city, and they are seeking God to be their salvation, their refuge and their strength in the midst of that trial. With that, let's jump into it. So, God is our refuge and strength. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Refuge and strength, help in trouble. So, immediately, refuge suggests defensive. Strength suggests offensive. So he's all at once a refuge that you withdraw into and we retreat into for salvation. He's like the rocky mountain that you would go into as a defense. You hear that happening in Israel, happens in the book of Judges. It also happens to things like, remember Lord of the Rings, when in the second book, the Two Towers, when the nation of Rohan is threatened, they always historically have sought refuge in Helm's Deep, and they go and withdraw into this grand mountain fortress and to weather out with the enemy in the storm. Well, that is God. He is that defensive help, but he's also the strength. And the term here could be the strength of a defense, but it could also mean an offensive one. meaning he's not just in there protecting and holding us, shielding us from trouble, but he's actually out on the offensive, eliminating the trouble as well. He is our very present help. So the fact that God is present to Israel is something that we need to see as a church as well, that even when he seems invisible, he is present. So he's their present help. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, and the mountains be moved, and so on. Let me see these now. So, one thing I noticed when I was reading this morning is I see earth, mountains, waters. Okay? So these verses 2 and 3, we see, let me quickly get something. Oh, so earth is close to immutable. Earth and mountains. Immutable. You know what immutable is, right? It means unchanging. So God is unchanging. But humans, especially in the ancient world, what would they have seen as something that is just constant, never changing? Well, a few things. And the earth and mountains are one of them. I mean, the sun and the moon coming up and going would have been seen as immutable as well, and the fact that they don't change, but they do change, right? Moons do change, and they go through courses and phases. The sun comes up and goes down, especially in the ancient world. So it would not have been seen in the same way as mountains and water. So even if these things that never move, the earth and the mountains, begin to give way, or are moved into the heart of the sea, and of course we know the sea and waters are always, often anyway, images of chaos. We see this early on in Genesis. We see this throughout. We even see it in the Gospels when Jesus calms a storm, which is actually quite relevant to this psalm in general. When Jesus calms a storm, the Gospels don't use a regular term for the sea. They'll use the term that usually means the waters. And the idea is they're trying to link arms with the Old Testament witness about the chaos of water and all this. So if even the things that we think don't move begin to move, even though the waters begin to roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. So in all of this here, God is king. And it's funny, these first 3 verses, let me get a different color because I want to make sure we don't miss this point. In these first 3 verses, it is all about nature. These next 3 verses will be about humans, attackers. Sorry, writing is bad. And the last ones will be about the world. And this is more humanity as a whole. Sorry. Okay, didn't mean to turn away from you a little bit there. So I want to show there's a bit of an outline here. Okay, so the first one, God is our help. He dominates nature. Though all nature falls apart, God is our strength. Next, he moves into something about, which is wonderful, isn't there? I love the eschatological imagery here. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. Oh, it's wonderful. What a wonderful line. Make glad the city of God. So this is very apocalyptic. So the city of God, when we talk about the coming city, and in Revelation 21, 22, we see it, of course, in Isaiah, Daniel, a bunch of folks talk about this coming city. All the prophets, a lot of the prophets as well. There's this river. In fact, if you'll notice in Eden, there's a river that runs through it, that nourishes. It provides for the city, for the region, for Eden. There's this river that runs through Zion, as he says. There's a river that will run through the new eschatological city in Revelation. And there's the tree of life on either side, and so on. So he's speaking now about something a little beyond us, but also talking about the metaphorical fact that God is that river. He is that stream that provides nourishment and comfort, but it's a still one. You notice a stream doesn't talk about a raging river, but this nourishing, the proper use of seas and of water will make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. See, it is God's presence. God's presence is what makes Zion and Jerusalem wonderful. What makes it the envy of the nations? It's the presence of God. Otherwise, what is it? It's just a city on a bit of a hill in a relatively impoverished nation in the ancient Near East. So he is again calling us to see that there's a city of God, this dwelling place where God dwells, that is our home, that brings rest, refuge, nourishment, safety, protection, and all that. And in the midst of her, she shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. I love the morning dawns. Every time I see morning dawns, it reminds me of, let me get a different color. It reminds me of Exodus. There's a spot, I love Exodus 14. I'll often reference it. In fact, again, it comes up here a lot. 27, I believe it is. When the Red Sea falls on the Egyptians, it happens at the break of morning. When the morning breaks, I don't remember the exact wording of it in Exodus, but it's the same idea that when morning dawns, down comes the water. Salvation, deliverance comes in the morning. Again, you've heard that in the Psalms as well. And here again, God will help her when the morning dawns. In fact, isn't that what... that's what Lord of the Rings, let's keep talking about Lord of the Rings. That's what happens at Helm's Deep when the people are looking for refuge in the fortress. They're about to die even in their fortress. What ends up saving them is that morning when it dawns, Gandalf comes with the reinforcements when the sun dawns. So same idea. So when morning dawns, so does salvation comes, and the nations rage and the kingdoms totter. Nations rage should remind you of Psalm 2. Kingdoms totter. He utters his voice and it melts. So everything moves. Okay, all moves, but God. God does not move. While everything seems in chaos, in the COVID situation, when everything seems loopy and we're worried about churches, are you going to get back to worshiping? Is the government going to use this opportunity to infringe on religious rights? There's a lot of anxiety I've been seeing lately in social media. But do we have this peace? The nations are raging. The nations are struggling. They don't understand what's happening. They're trying to find answers. We have a king who's enthroned, that when he utters his voice, the earth melts. There is peace here. There's peace that is meant to be. When you dwell in the city of God, there is peace in the city of God because God is in their midst. The Lord of hosts is with us. Oh my goodness, I love this verse as well. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Think about the wording here. Hosts is army. Sorry, I'm putting it in the margin there, so I'm going to put it bigger here. Army. So it's offensive. It's the power of God. Is it the hosts, heavenly hosts, earthly hosts? It doesn't really matter. The point is the God who has offensive power at his hands, the armies. Then he is the God of Jacob. What did Jacob experience? But grace. We talked about that as well. And in the sermon series, you're hearing more about Jacob as well if you're following my sermons. So the army, so there's power. Let me get rid of this and just put power here. So there's power, there's grace, and a fortress is protection. So you see the reason they should be still? The reason that they should be calm in the midst of trial? Because this God of theirs is the God of power, of grace, and protection. Oh, it's wonderful. Keep going. I can't spend too long. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. And this is interesting. He's calling you to look at the desolation that God brings to the earth. So the destruction, the judgment God brings to the earth, you're being asked to look on. And this is somehow to be comforting. That's hard to do when the world is perishing. How do we gain comfort from it? And the reason comes, I think, here. There's an interesting word that's used here. This word, behold. It is a word that is not the normal. It's not like when it says, behold, the Lord comes. When it says it like that as an exclamation, it's the word hine, or hine, which is to look. It says, look, take a look. And he's drawing your attention to something. But this is a term that is not that same word. It is more akin to what the biblical writers say the prophets do. That they look into something and see behind it. That there's a discernment and knowledge in what they're seeing. Not just to look at something, but to see what is happening. So we're told to look at the desolation that God's bringing on the earth, the judgment, and that's to bring us peace because we see it's God doing it. You see, when you see things happening that look chaotic to the world, but you know God's behind it, we can have peace because we dwell in the city of God. We are safe in the arms of Christ. So he's calling us to have this almost prophetic vision here to understand what is happening. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. Again, massive power. So remember we talked about how this is now about the world. And it is, isn't it? Let me get a different color again to highlight here. This is the world is in chaos. The world now, it's not just individual attackers, but the world is struggling. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth, breaks the bow, shatters the spear, burns the chariots with fire. And then, of course, so his dominance over the world then turns into be still and know that I am God. Now, here's the fascinating part. You and I have been taught continually to see this as about you. That you should be still amidst the tumult of the world, which is certainly true. And I think that's part of what he's saying here. But the majority, many, I'd say it's pretty evenly split in scholars. And every scholar who talks about this psalm points out something. That this is not just an injunction, something that is meant for you as the one who's being harassed by the world. It's not saying for you only to be still and know that he is God. But this is actually God calling out to all the raging world in verses 9, 8, and 9 and saying, hey, raging world, be still and know that I am God. This is why I said it was like when Jesus calms a storm in Mark 4, for instance. When he says, peace, be still, that is a rebuke. The word peace he uses there is we use 10 times in the New Testament, and it's always referred to as be quiet, shut up. And he uses it to still and to quiet demons. And this same idea is happening here, where yes, it certainly is peace for you to dwell in peace and be still. But what is happening as well is he is rebuking the world and the nations and saying, stop it, be still, know that I am God, that I will be exalted in all the earth, that though the nations rage, remember Psalm 2? The nations rage against him, but they will not be stopped. So it is all at once a rebuke and a comfort. Okay? So I would urge you to stop seeing it exclusively as something nice and warm and fuzzy for you. It certainly is meant for you, but it's very typical of our culture to make everything about you. But God here is showing his dominance over the nations, and that is your comfort. That is your comfort. Because let's face it, when you want to be still, let me get here. This is what is happening in this. I won't go into any more detail in the psalm. There are 3 occasions in the Old Testament when God uses this same idea of be still. There's others, but that's the 3 primary ones. The first one happens in Exodus 14. And that is at the Red Sea, when the nations are freaking out because the Egyptians are coming in one direction and the sea is behind them. And Moses says, only be still and know that the Lord will fight for you. Right? When he says that, the term for stillness there means silent, quiet. Okay, so be still, shut up, because the people are complaining, right? So God is saying, and Moses is saying to the people, be quiet, stop your talking. It's just distracting you from what God is doing. Just be quiet and watch. God is going to fight. When it happens again in Psalm 37, verse 7, the same thing happens when it says be still, but there the word is to be motionless or rigid. Forgive my writing. Motionless or rigid. So there's a physical stop, like stand still, like literally like a soldier. Stand still and know that he is God. So in one sense he's saying be quiet. The next one he is saying don't move. Okay? In this psalm, in Psalm 46, verse 10, sorry, that's a 10. What it means is to let go, grow slack. To grow slack, to release might be a good one as well, a good translation. So the idea here is we're holding on to something. And this is why I think the emphasis here is not about you and I, but it's about the nations, because the psalm is depicting us as being having safety in God for sure. But what he is directly saying to the world is they seem to be fighting against him. They're raging against him. And what he's saying is let go of your belief that you can control the world, that you can dominate it, that you have your free reign in this world. Grow slack, release your grip, and know that I have my hands on the scepter, not you. Now, of course, that does work for us individually in trials as well, because we want to control things as we are victims as well. But I think we should see both ends here. But do you see the differences? We talk about being still. Do we really understand the how robust it is, what it means to grow, to be still, to let go. And there's plenty of sermons out there, I'm sure, that cover this, and one day I'll preach it as well. So that is what is happening in this incredibly wonderful Psalm 46. Tomorrow, oh my goodness, again, I've let us down, haven't I? I haven't looked at to see what we could preach or what we could talk about tomorrow. Let me go into let's do Psalm 52. Okay, Psalm 52. That's a fun little one. And we'll get into that. So until then, thanks so much. I hope this was helpful. I know it. Sometimes I can talk a little longer, but it's such an exciting psalm. It's one that so many people read and find comfort in. I thought it was important to look at it. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.